Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a webinar on health savings account, or HSAs. It's just 10 o'clock West Coast time right now, so we're going to give everybody another minute to log in and go through the login process. We thank you all for joining promptly. One thing we're going to jump to on the slide is for those of you that are interested in SHRM CE credit. We're going to ask that you notify us in the chat feature, or you can email me afterwards for SHRM CE credit. Again, if you are listening to this on a replay, unfortunately, CE credit is only available for live meeting attendees. To receive the CE credit, you do have to be logged into the webinar for a full 50 minutes. Don't worry about that. We will be tracking it through the GoToWebinar session. And you can only receive CE credit once for this presentation. So we do want to make sure that those of you who are looking for CE credit, this is your first time viewing it. If you've sat through this presentation before with Franklin Templeton, you can only receive credit once. So we appreciate you all joining promptly. We're going to join in roughly 1 minute and look to start off the presentation. Thank you all for joining promptly. Okay, it's a couple minutes after 10 o'clock now, and we're looking forward to getting started. Again, for those of you that are looking for SHRM CE credit, please do let us know that we'll be submitting that for you. Again, it's only available for the live meeting, not on the replays, and you do need to be logged in for a full 50 minutes to receive that CE credit. Again, just for those of you who aren't familiar with Heffernan's retirement division, part of Heffernan Insurance Brokers, we are the retirement and financial services side. We've got about 125 years of combined retirement experience. We work with over $4.3 billion in retirement assets and over 175 plans. We've been very focused in the nonprofit, but also with educational institutions, corporate, technology, professional services, corporations. We're really here if you have any questions about Heffernan's retirement services. We're here to help with that. And one of the areas that we've been seeing a lot of focus on, and why we have Tina White from Franklin Templeton joining us today, is really the intersection between retirement savings and healthcare costs. So we have Tina White from Franklin Templeton, who's going to be going through a discussion on health savings account and the intersection between health and retirement. Tina's been with Franklin Templeton. Oh, geez, Tina, how many years now have you been with Franklin?
Over 14.
14 years. You outrank me on the 13 years I've been with Heffernan, and we're happy to have her go through the presentation today on health savings accounts. Again, if there are any questions, you can use the chat feature or use the question box. All the phones will be in listen-only mode to cut down on background noise. But again, if you have questions or you would like CE credit, you can email me. My email is johnc@hefgroup.com. And with that, Tina, I'll try to hand over the presentation, but if it doesn't work, just let me know when you want me to jump to the next slides.
Oh, okay, great.
All right.
Are you able to, yeah, just tell me when you can see my screen.
Okay. Here we go. I think I was able to hand over mouse control to you, so you should be able to click next slide and be able to control it.
Oh, okay, perfect. Imagine that. Well, good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to extend a thank you to my colleagues at Heffernan for inviting me to speak to you today. And as John mentioned, I'm Tina White, the investment-only wholesaler on the retirement side with Franklin Templeton Investments. Now, there's a couple things that I just wanted to mention quickly before we get started. Franklin Templeton is a California-based asset manager with approximately $1.5 trillion in assets under management. As John mentioned, I've been here at Franklin for more than 14 years now, and I can say with conviction that we are one of the world's most trusted asset management firms in the industry. Along with amazing partners like Heffernan, we have been helping people build their nest eggs and retire with dignity for more than 70 years now. And that brings me to why we are here today. We think health savings accounts, otherwise known as HSAs, are becoming a much larger part of the overall benefits conversation. But specifically, we think it needs to be discussed not just as a medical benefit, but also as a retirement benefit. So over the course of the next 30 to 45 minutes, I hope to share some thoughts on this topic. And to set the stage, we will be discussing healthcare costs, the basics of HSAs, and defining what an HDHP is. We'll talk about the evolution of health savings accounts. We'll look at a couple of case studies, and then we'll end with some questions. So let's go ahead and get started with several statistics. So at Franklin Templeton, we every year do what we call a RISE survey, and that stands for Retirement Income Strategies and Expectations Survey. So long way of saying RISE. We survey approximately 2,000 people, half men, half women, and this was one of the questions that we posed. What percentage of workers are very confident that they will be able to pay their medical expenses in retirement? 32% are confident that they will be able to pay their medical expenses in retirement. That's a little bit frightening. And 1/3 actually said they were most concerned about paying for healthcare in retirement. Now, there's three major concerns that people generally have, and this encompasses two age groups. So we have people under the age of 55 and those over the age of 55. But clearly, you can see that health-related expenses are a primary concern for both age groups. And I'll use myself as an example. I'm 52 and I'm actually in the same camp. You know, I'm starting to think about, winding down in about 10 years and, what does the cost of healthcare look like for me? It's definitely very worrisome, and I know that I'm not alone. With the rising healthcare costs, employers recognize that healthcare benefits are one of the most critical for their employees, and they report increasing costs of healthcare, actually 20%, and wellness 20% as well for benefits. So at Franklin Templeton, we think about the big three of retirement, and I can relate this to a triathlon. You have the essentials, which is your food, your water, shelter. So that's the running portion of the triathlon. Then we have lifestyle. This would be hobbies, travel, etc. And I look at this as the bicycling portion. You can go fancy or you can go plain. And then healthcare. This is likely to be the largest expense in retirement, so I call this the swimming portion. Now, you may be in great shape, perhaps the best shape of your life, and you can run long distances, you may be able to bike long distances, but if you don't properly train for the swimming portion or you don't know how to swim, the outcome is not going to be favorable. You're not going to be prepared, and it's not going to be an ideal scenario. Now, the first topic that we'll delve into is healthcare costs. Now, it's not exactly breaking news that the cost of employer benefits in the US is skyrocketing. Between 2010 to 2020, employers spent 61% more for family coverage and 50% more for single coverage for their employees. Employers have typically shouldered the burden for covering healthcare premiums. And on average, employers cover 73% of the premium for family coverage and 83% for single coverage. However, the increasing costs are forcing many employers to consider a high deductible healthcare plan, otherwise known as HDHP for short. These are also known as account-based healthcare plans, just so you're aware of that. That would be an ABHP. In fact, 85% of companies plan to offer an ADHP last year in 2020. And this definitely helps the bottom line for companies, minimizes the costs. Healthcare premiums continue to outpace inflation and workers' earnings. In fact, healthcare premiums have outpaced overall inflation by 120% over the last 5 years. So the period between 2015 to 2020. Now, this illustration projects the total healthcare costs for a 65, a 55, and a 45-year-old couple, which is based on a future value. So as you can see, a healthy 45-year-old couple today is projected to pay over $1.7 million for healthcare. And there's no surprise, no wonder people are worried about healthcare costs. Now, at the end of the presentation, we'll look at the potential tax savings that an HSA can offer in each one of these scenarios. So to help employees boost their retirement readiness, you may consider offering them an option to start saving now to cover future medical costs, and do so in an account that has the potential to keep up with or to outpace inflation. Hopefully that's making sense thus far. So now that I've given you the bad news, let's talk about the good news. So what is an HDHP? It's a high deductible health plan, an insurance plan with a high minimum deductible that the insurance holder must pay for medical expenses before the insurance kicks in. And let me just say, I think that that's a terrible naming convention in my mind, because it's not really that high of a deductible. And we'll get to that here in a minute. And then an HSA, health savings account. So a savings account used in conjunction with an HDHP that allows users to save money tax-free to pay for qualified healthcare expenses. Now, I'd like to point out here that the S in an HSA stands for savings, not spending. So some people get confused here, and they will say an HSA is a health spending account. Well, that might be true in a sense, but it actually stands for savings. So I just wanted to point that out. So HSAs sit at the intersection of retirement and healthcare. And with costs of healthcare continuing to rise, Plan sponsors and individuals are looking for ways to help find a balance between savings for retirement and healthcare. If there's one thing that you take away from this session, this is the slide. And at Franklin Templeton, we think we are at a crossroads. And these two areas, retirement and healthcare, are actually converging. Health savings accounts fall right smack dab in the middle. Now, there's several tax advantages of an HSA generally, and depending on where you live. HSAs have been coined triple tax-free because of the efficiency. So what does that actually mean? So contributions are not subject to income tax, which means that the money that you're depositing is pre-tax or deductible. The earnings and interest grow tax-free, so your money is growing tax-free. And the withdrawals or the money that is coming out can be tax-free as long as it's used for qualified medical expenses. And one caveat that I should make here is that we don't offer tax advice, so that's one piece of advice that I can give. Make sure you consult with your tax planner on something like this.
Tina, just to pause for 1 second here because we had a couple questions coming through. One of the benefits of the HSA compared to a 401k plan is that step 3. Step 1 and step 2 are highly similar to a 401k or a 403b, but it's that step 3 that makes the HSA unique and oftentimes a better vehicle, especially with that step 3 of using the money tax-free coming out to pay for qualified medical expenses. So that's really the benefit. You get the tax deferral and the tax-free withdrawals. So just wanted to clarify that point. We had a few questions to that end.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and feel free to stop me at any time. We can definitely address any questions along the way and make this conversational. So yes, HSAs are triple tax-free, but again, you may want to consult your tax advisor as well. And then, John, to your point, I think on this next slide here, we basically do this side by side, but there are a lot of similarities. It's not, exactly the same, but there are some similarities that exist here. So while both offer the tax deductible contributions, and assuming that the 401k isn't a Roth 401k, only the HSA will offer you those tax-free withdrawals, right, for qualified medical expenses. But if you don't use the withdrawals for QMEs, qualified medical expenses, then you're taxed at ordinary income when those come out. So it's similar to an IRA withdrawal, of course, if you're over the age. And then no Social Security, Medicare tax on contributions, that would be another benefit. And I think most importantly too, there's no RMDs, no required minimum distributions, which you may remember previously, those began at 70 and a half. But the age, I think now, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the age was raised to 72 following the passage of the Secure Act. So your money can stay in. You're not required to start taking it out at a certain age. And I think that that's an incredible benefit. Your money can just sit there in the bucket and keep on growing. So, yeah. And then let's look at eligibility too. That often comes up. And, you can't have a health savings account without an HSA. So consider that a marriage. Those go hand in hand. I actually knew somebody that and I'm not sure how this happened, they opened an HSA, but they didn't have an HDHP plan, and you can't do that. Those have to be married together, so keep that in mind. You cannot be a dependent on another person's tax return, and you can't be covered by any other health insurance plan either. So again, those three components. And a lot more employers are moving over to the HDHPs just because of the cost. It's an incredible savings from the employer's perspective. And then in terms of the limits here, let's look at the contribution limits. So for 2021, an individual can contribute $3,600 or $7,200 for a family. And then if you're 55 plus, there's also a catch-up contribution that's allowed. And then with the deductibles on a high deductible healthcare plan, $1,400 for an individual and $2,800 for a family. And that's what I meant when I said a terrible naming convention. I mean, those aren't really high deductibles by any means, so I think they should rephrase that in my mind. But remember, this is the amount that the insurance holder will pay before their insurance kicks in. So that's money that you're going to front. And then last, for out-of-pocket expenditures, $7,000 for the individual, and then $14,000 for the family. And this is once the deductible is met, the policyholder will then share the costs with the insurance plan. Okay, so now we will move into the evolution of HSAs, and we think this seems very familiar. So HSAs have evolved over the past 14 years, and this is since the time, I think it was 2003, when President Bush signed the Medicare Modernization Act. And that created the HSAs. So what, it's been 18 years or so now. But the intention of the bill was to introduce consumerism into the healthcare marketplace. And we've seen this movie before. We think that, or we think we have. So this should seem familiar to you, actually. And as Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And we think that we're witnessing a shift that is similar to the early stages of the 401k market 30 years ago. We had defined benefit style healthcare then, or a traditional plan, but that's starting to shift into more of a defined contribution style, which controls or lessens the cost to employers, and it provides more choice and really gives the responsibility back to the individual for their own health care. So the paradigm shift means opportunity for disruption for the current healthcare model. So yes, 18 years of existence, the HSA industry is estimated to generate over $1 billion in annual revenue. And then if you believe, like we believe, that trends tend to begin in the larger market space, and then they trickle down to the small and mid-market, these trend lines illustrate the popularity with larger companies and the trajectory of smaller companies. And this is forecasted to continue trending upwards. The small and mid-size employer market will likely continue to see growth of HSA adoptions in the future. HDHP adoption continues to be very popular with the larger plans, though, primarily. Since 2015, health savings account adoption has grown by 30%, from 43% in 2015 to 56% in 19, and over a third, 39% of employers report making contributions to HSAs. So if that's not something that you're currently doing, you might want to consider doing that, because that appears to be what the peer group is doing. And here we have super spenders versus super savers. Current HSA participants can be viewed as spenders, so 56%, meaning they use anywhere from over 100% of their funds to 51% to pay for current medical expenses. And the savers, 44%, use anywhere from 50% of their funds to using none of their funds. So the savers are looking to set aside their funds now to save for future medical expenses later. And as you know, medical expenses can decimate a retiree's retirement portfolio. So that's why the savers keep filling up that HSA bucket for a future time. So taking a little bit of a hit now, but you know, in the end, they're going to have a huge bucket of money there to pay for medical expenses. And we all know that's primarily when medical conditions arise and, you know, you start facing medical problems, and, you know, definitely would be nice to have an account there that could pay for all of that in later years. Now there's 3 types of HSA owners, and we covered a couple of these already, but these are not exclusive, as an individual could be one of or all 3 at a certain given time here. But spenders, they typically use all their assets to pay for current medical expenses. And this reminds me more of people that are younger in nature, with younger families that, you know, kids are, you know, sick all the time, in and out of the doctor, getting broken bones and the like. Savers may not have a current medical need and accumulate their assets in a cash account, but by not investing the assets, they could be missing out on potential growth. And then the investors, those are the ones that I mentioned. They're seeking to maximize their savings potential by investing their HSA assets. And the benefit here is that, you know, those assets will hopefully keep up with inflation and most likely outpace inflation. So it's nice to have that option. Now, why would someone not invest in an HSA account? What would prevent that? 44% of HSA participants reported that they don't invest because they lack awareness of what the options are, and they just don't understand. Here's where they need more education. So they do nothing. And that's where we in the industry need to do a better job in terms of hand-holding and education. 40% of individuals reported they do not currently participate in their plan's HD-HP plan because either they haven't had time to switch, that was 9%, or what happens a lot of times is they miss open enrollment. Happens all the time. So then they have to wait another, 6 months, year down the road. 22% have never looked into the plan. So again, education. Or 9%, they just don't understand the details. So it's always important to speak in layman's terms to our employees, participants of the plan. Employees with access to an HD-HP could be missing out on an opportunity to improve their retirement readiness simply because they don't understand the benefit or they haven't had the time to consider the options. So again, they're going to need our help.
And this is one of the places, Tina, Heffernan has both an employee benefits healthcare division and a retirement division. And it's really the blending between the two can sometimes cause a gap if you don't have those organizations working together and deciding who's going to do that education. We often find, when it comes to talking about how to enroll in a high deductible health plan and save in an HSA, they're two different conversations. The medical side having one about whether the high deductible health plan fits, how that compares to an HMO program or a different, more standard insurance and co-insurance solution. But then when it comes to the savings, most benefits brokers don't feel comfortable making those investment recommendations. So the money sits in cash for those who enroll. And it can be one of those unique areas of bringing together your retirement and your benefits team to really get a full educational picture around open enrollment for the employees.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Really good point, John. This slide talks about enrollment. HSA enrollments continue to grow year over year, and you can see the growth has been pretty significant, which reinforces the need for education. And according to Devonair Research, an industry-leading HSA research firm, as of the end of the year in 2020, there are now over 30 million enrollees and still climbing. And again, this Devonair Research shows that at the end of 2020, HSAs currently have over 58 billion in assets, and the trends will or should continue their growth trajectory upward. Now, the data on the previous slide indicated that HSAs are increasing in popularity, and here are the actual investments in HSAs. Now, this continues to grow too, but there's room for improvement. So when we look at 2019, only 24% of HSA accounts were actually invested. So there's a lot of accounts out there that are in cash. So good point here. We've got a lot of work to do as an industry, I believe, to get people invested. So let's look at a couple of case studies. And the first one is about Allie. And Allie is just starting out, and she's excited to start saving in her 401k plan. She has learned the value of saving early and plans to save 10% of her income. So if she puts the entire savings into her 401k, and her total savings would include the employer match, it would be about $8,300. However, if she split her savings between the 401k and an HSA, and this is assuming that the employer makes a contribution to her HSA, she could actually increase her savings to $9,300 and start saving now to help offset her healthcare costs later. So that's just one way to look at it for a younger person that has an opportunity to do both. And then in this particular case, we have husband and wife and their adult child, Brad. And this highlights that, HSAs can provide flexibility for families, and it can allow parents and their adult children to start saving now for their health-related expenses. Brad is not a dependent on his parents' tax return, so that's why he can actually be a part of that as well. Hopefully that makes sense. And then just to wrap it up here, we covered a lot of things here in this short period of time, but a couple of takeaways. Healthcare related benefit costs are a top concern for plan sponsors. That we know. Paying for healthcare in retirement is extremely expensive, and saving for health related costs now can help enhance an individual's retirement readiness later. So engage a trusted retirement plan professional to provide that education. That's where John comes in and his team. HSAs are a growing trend and probably not likely to go away. In the last 3 years, HSA enrollments have increased over 41%, and assets have actually surged 185%. So I think this is an incredible opportunity, and it's another opportunity to get in front of your plan participants and your employees to help them prepare for their future. So with that, I'll stop here, but were there any questions, or John, did you have any comments or anything you wanted to add from your side?
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I think most employers are aware of how the high deductible health plan helps them in terms of a medical option, reducing costs compared to your more standard insurance program that doesn't have the high deductible piece, can be beneficial for employers. But it really becomes that question when you're restructuring your benefits, how do we entice more people into the high deductible health plan? Because in my opinion, and again, mostly what I work on is retirement accounts. Going back to your situation with Allie, I think it was a study that another organization did that said the average retiree spends over almost $300,000 now out of pocket in retirement for healthcare costs. And that's where the savings in the HSA, kind of like saving for retirement, you don't have to use all of that money every year. So it can be a benefit for employees to accumulate that money separately in the HSA to fund their healthcare costs in retirement and other medical expenses and things that are covered there, as opposed to using your 401k assets where the money comes out and is taxed regardless of what you use it for. So I think there's a different shift in terms of talking with the employees at open enrollment that we found is beneficial when you bring in a different look and view about high deductible health plans and HSAs. We always run into the big concern of people saying, okay, what if my child or I get sick January 2nd? And you haven't had the time to fund that HSA. And so that can be one of the challenges of how do you make those trade-offs for employees. And that's where we've kind of seen that intersection between your benefits brokers and your retirement advisors working together. Couple of the questions we have coming in is for the situation we went to, excuse me, I'm just going to go back here with Brad. Brad is covered under his parents' high deductible health plan. So that's where he's covered under their plan, not under his own plan. But since it's a family, he can make that $7,200 contribution as opposed to the individual maximum, which I think you had, it's $3,100. Is that now right, Lisa?
Yeah, I believe it is. Let's see.
We had it back here.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for too.
So I believe that's it. the 401k and the HSA contributions are completely separate. So you can max out your 401k at 19,500 and max out your HSA at either that family level or the individual level. And then if you're over 50, you get the catch-up contributions, which is 6,500 for the 401k or 403b and an additional $1,000 for the high deductible health plan. So it is another way to look at that. The annual contribution cap is there. It's a combined contribution between employees and employers. So it is a little different than your 401k, where it's 3,600 is the maximum contribution for an individual, 72 for a family. But there is a combined limit for the employer. So if the employer puts in $3,000 for the employee for their HSA, they can only save $600 on their own as an individual. Likewise, if the employer puts in $1,000, the employee's contribution is just reduced by that, which is a little different than the employee-employer relationship in the 401k. One of the questions is about, and Tina, I believe this is a yes, but I'll confirm, long-term care services and in-home care. Are those under the qualified expenses for HSAs currently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would have to look at the list. I just looked at it this morning too. I can confirm that, John.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll look at it and confirm.
We'll get back on that question. I believe it's a yes. Certain things like buying over-the-counter, Tylenol are not, but it's the same list of medical expenses. So it is, the main challenge that we have is kind of this discussion that we have here with Allie and working through it is how do you split those contributions? And oftentimes if employers do have a matching contribution or some sort of employer contribution to the HSA, it can be more valuable to max out your HSA first, then in the future, fund your 401k afterwards. Again, a lot of it is how you structure the plan and where the employees spend their next best benefit dollar. Looks like there are a few other questions coming in around what's covered. When we send out the slides and a replay of the presentation, we'll include a list of what's covered as well for what types of HSA expenses can be used. The other question is what happens to the HSA at the end of the year, and that's really one of the key differences between HSAs and flexible spending accounts is the HSA money doesn't expire. So if you go through a year and consume no medical services and put in $7,200, at the end of the year you have $7,200 and it's still there for you to use on future medical expenses. So if you're in one of those plans with a maximum out of pocket that's above the annual contribution, you can keep building that HSA account and have it build over time and grow tax deferred. Then when you take the money out for healthcare expenses, it comes out tax-free. Again, if you do decide to take the money out for non-healthcare expenses, when you're in retirement or beyond and you've overfunded the HSA, then it comes out and it's taxed as ordinary income, like the 401k plan. There are no penalties for taking your HSA out at any age for medical expenses. So different than the 401k, as I said, there's no retirement age that you have to get beyond or that 59 and a half. So there is more flexibility, and they do recognize that HSAs, unlike your 401ks, will have a money out feature to it regularly as people are going to consume healthcare throughout the year. And it's not meant to be just an accumulation vehicle. It'll also be, the savings account, but it is, often correctly referred to as a health spending account, as money does come out. Are there any additional questions? I know we're pretty much at the end of the presentation and at the 50 minutes for the SHRM CE credit. Oh, good. a couple more questions came in. Yes, so that's where, in retirement, one of the things that has been studied and found is that as people age in retirement, their gross spending year to year actually doesn't change very much. But where that money is spent does change greatly. And as people get towards their later years, people spend more and more money on healthcare and healthcare requirements. So, you might have, going into 65, saved $200,000 for retirement healthcare, and you don't use it all year over year, and then you can take that money out and as you get to retirement. If we think of the extreme example of somebody who's managed to save $1 million in their HSA and has overfunded it, they can take that money out and it's taxed and it's used for other things that aren't medical. Again, if it's used for medical, it's taken out. But if you bought a boat, obviously you'd have to have a long way to convince the IRS that that's a medical expense. So it would be a taxed benefit withdrawal, very similar to the 401k plan. But that's where a lot of individuals can fund their HSA and then move it. Great question. There isn't any portability between HSAs and 401ks. So unfortunately, you can't move money back and forth between the two. You can make contributions to HSAs, you can make contributions to 401ks. Similar to a 401k, you can take your HSA with you. So you can set it up through Health Equity, Optum, any of those resources that are available, or whomever you have, HSA Bank, any of the resources. And then like your 401k, you can take that with you as you change jobs. The HSA is portable for the employee and roll it over. They don't have to do anything with it. But no, you can't move money between 401ks, HSAs, and IRAs. Each of them has their own tax status and is tracked and will remain separate. Okay, great questions. Appreciate you all asking these good opportunities to learn more about HSAs and combining how it all goes together. Please do remember, those of you who want the SHRM CE credit, to send me a message or a chat. For those of you who already have, I've got you listed down and we're aware, or you can send me an email. But are there any other questions before we end the webinar and get everybody back to their Tuesday?
John, I just had one additional tidbit here. There's a complete list of eligible HSA expenses for this year at www.hsalist.org. So if anybody's interested, it's all alphabetical, and then you can look up certain things to see if it qualifies or not.
Perfect, thank you. We'll make sure to include that along with the materials that are going out.
Sure.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you all very much for joining us. We hope we've shared with you some good information and ideas around health savings accounts and how to kind of think about those benefits next time you're doing your open enrollment, and how to kind of think about that in combination with the retirement plan you do offer to your employees. So thank you all very much for joining us. We've appreciated your time. We'll give everybody a few minutes to log out, but thank you all and have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you, everyone.